Magnus, thank you. Very good Hello, Magnus.
Hi, good afternoon, Didi.
Good, how are you?
Good.
I'm great. No complaints.
That's fantastic. A little bit getting winters, yeah, so get warm at night. Get warm at night.
Yes, definitely. That's why we
Are
love
we
to
good?
work.
I'm going to switch off. I'll switch on when Alec comes up, okay?
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Till then, bye.
Aha. Magnus, hoe gaan het, man? Oh, you can't hear me. Can't you?
How are you, Alex?
We got the wrong microphone on. How are you, my friend?
I'm extremely good, Alec. I see you doing some Afrikaans podcast. Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, potgooi. Charles done 2, I think, so far.
Oh, that's nice. You must ask our guy, our little Dutchies to help you there.
Yeah. Who?
We got many Afrikaans planners and consultants and stuff, so we will help you with stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
No, we definitely, it's a big market, and we haven't paid attention to it. We had a thing with a guy called Jacques Basson, who did a podcast called Klipkouers, which was really good. And Klipkouers, unfortunately, he then left the UK and came back, and I'm seeing him actually tomorrow, I think. Anyway, or next week, to talk about Klipkouers. So that one will restart today. But Charles Charles really good. He's very smart, and it would be, he's a CFA, so he knows all about investing and things. So we're quite excited about that, and about our show tonight. And we're going to talk a little bit about our conference, which is quite fun.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And we've got Nick. We've got a really good interview with Nick Hudson. So all is good.
Afternoon, Magnus. Hope you're well.
Justin, I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now what happens? There it goes. Jink. So you get this automatic. There we go. Now I can see you on it. Let me just switch off. Make sure I switch off my. Shucks. It's the wrong one. There we go. Okay, I'm off. The sound is off. There are 18 people watching us right now, Magnus. So we need to behave ourselves. I won't ask you if you've got a Free State rugby jersey like last time. It was a bit of a mistake.
I'll have to get a red and white one. Yeah, I'll get a red and white one.
A red and white one. Oh, you mean for the Lions?
For the Lions, yeah.
Actually, we got divided loyalties here.
I'm Stormers, as a result of being from the Cape, though.
Yeah.
I'm Sharks, as a result of being from the Kingdom.
The Kingdom is in turmoil,
also
eh?
Sharks. You're from the Kingdom? Aren't you from the Kingdom? Yeah, we haven't got a king. We're a kingdom without a king, but we still got you.
Yeah, but you got many queens.
I was going to say something about Cape Town, but we'll leave that.
Well, Cape Town's got more queens than KwaZulu-Natal, yeah.
There's 17 people watching now. One person has fallen off. They didn't like your comment. Okay. All right. So our community then comes onto YouTube. Hopefully they're going to be giving us live chats. So sending questions as well. We're trying to make it a little more interactive. At our new studio, we're going to be bringing in phone calls soon, but that's all waiting for the new studio. Right. Are we ready, Dudu? Okay. Magnus, you ready?
I'm good.
Okay, let's go.
Stand by. Business Power Hour starts in 25 seconds. $15 seconds. 10 seconds.
The BizNews Power Hour.
Welcome to the BizNews Power Hour, where we give you the rational perspective on business news that matters. Well, can you believe it's the 5th of May, Wednesday, the 5th of May, coming to you from Sandton here at the headquarters of BizNews.com, global headquarters of BizNews.com. Justin?
It's an interesting way to put it, Alec.
Well, we do have colleagues in London and Edinburgh. So I guess you can call it global.
You're not lying.
We're not lying, for sure. And we're going to be bringing you lots of interesting stuff in the next hour. Guest co-host tonight, Magnus Heystek. Hey, Magnus.
Yeah, good afternoon, Alec. Good afternoon, listeners and viewers.
Listeners and viewers. Yeah, let's not forget that we do go live streamed via YouTube. I think from next week, we're going to have to probably suit up.
It's going to be interesting. I'm going to have to go to the dry cleaners, but that's not a bad thing.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about some crazy stuff that's going on. South African Airways and Mango are being bailed out again. 2.7 billion rand of taxpayers' money has been voted by our governors to put into those airlines, which are already bust and have got rid of most of their people. But who knows? Miles van der Molen, who's the chief executive of one of the competitors, Cemair, must be salivating at the thought of getting, say, 800 million that's going to Mango. Imagine what he could do with it. Anyway, he'll be telling us a little more about that story and what it means and why it's happening. We've got Nick Hudson from Panda. I had a fascinating interview with Nick this afternoon. We're going to run quite a strong clip, quite a long and strong clip, just before 6 o'clock tonight. And then Sikonathi Mantshasha, who's got to have the hardest job in the world. Magnus, wouldn't you agree? Really, to be the spokesperson for Eskom. Wow.
I'm sure he's missing journalism when he was on the other side of the telephone.
Well, I'd like to say to him, come on, Sikonathi, come back home. Come to a place where the stress only happens during deadlines, not 24/7. But I guess he's certainly risen to the challenge. There's so much going on at Eskom at the moment, but we are going to be picking up with him on the story we've been following very closely on those tubular construction criminals. We got to get APSA onto the program sometime, Justin.
We have to, Alec. It's going to be tough, though, with the amount of bad media scrutiny that they've been under. But yes, I do agree. We'll try our best.
But imagine what Paul O'Sullivan said. Here's this guy. He works for Eskom. He's a group executive, so he's one of the top guys. He goes into the bank and draws 5 million rand in notes. And the APSA, and he didn't do it once. He did it many times. And APSA said, well, there's nothing unusual with that. You and I go into a bank and try and draw 100,000 rands in notes, and you know what is likely to happen. Well, yeah, go and speak to somebody else, please. What do they let you get in an ATM? 4,000 rand?
A few thousand.
The whole thing is just bizarre. Somebody somewhere hasn't been asking the right questions, or certainly hasn't been telling the truth. And then we're going to also be talking to Reyburn Hendricks. Now, what's the story there? Revego, we spoke to him just ahead of supposed listing.
So we spoke to him just ahead of supposed listing at 5 o'clock that day, half an hour before the show. We hear that the listing is going to be pulled. The SENS comes out the morning after at 8. The listing was pulled, but it was just delayed. And now we hear that the listing is completely cancelled. From what Reyburn was telling me today, it's going to be another 12 to 24 months. They're going to get their prospectus in order. They're going to fund their underlying businesses in South Africa, as only one is really profitable right now. It's a very concentrated risk scenario. And I think there are a few other regulatory issues which we'll unpack with him. I'm very excited for that conversation.
I listed a company in 1999. The hoops we had to jump through before we could even get to the point of saying we are going to list. And these poor guys must have done so much investing of time, energy, effort, and cash to get to that point and then have it pulled at the last minute. And there's no Chinese government like Alipay involved here.
Exactly, Alec. And what confuses me, this is the only listing on the JSE this year. What have the JSE been doing? Surely 2 weeks before. This isn't the New York Stock Exchange and there's 2 IPOs a day. What have they been doing for the last 4 months? And yeah, absolutely crazy.
Well, I guess they've been keeping themselves otherwise occupied. Our editor-at-large, Jackie Cameron, is always well occupied, and she's got today's flash briefing.
South African Revenue Service Commissioner Edward Kieswetter has promised zero tolerance against tax dodgers. He told Parliament on Wednesday that the Revenue Service would act without fear or favour against any individual or entity that did not meet its tax obligations. It's been reported that the ANC has failed to pay over to SARS millions of rands in pay-as-you-earn tax collected from employees. The ANC is currently struggling to pay staff salaries. In news for medical aid members, the government has proposed new rules to curb steep co-payments. The Registrar of Medical Schemes has gazetted a notice indicating that these co-payments will be limited in the coming months. In addition, medical schemes must prove they are fair, equitable, and cost-effective in selecting preferred providers. New guidelines will be published soon. New coronavirus variants have proliferated across southern and eastern Africa, exacerbating the challenge of bringing the pandemic under control. This is according to analysis of genomics data. The strain first detected in South Africa late last year is completely dominating all infection in southern Africa and seems to be entering East Africa, says Tulio de Oliveira, a director of CRISP, which is a genomics institute in Durban. De Oliveira says that another variant is completely dominating infections in Uganda and Rwanda and is spreading through truck routes. 2 separate strains have been identified in Nigeria, one of which has spread to more than 50 other countries, the CRISP director said. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance has urged the South African government to halt flights from India, where there is a shortage of oxygen to treat people with COVID-19 in hospitals. In the UK, the National Health Service is getting ready to roll out booster jabs from September, which would be the 3rd vaccine of the year to fight COVID-19. The MTN Group is making progress towards separating the company's financial technology business and disposing of South African towers as the continent's largest wireless carrier works on slimming down. A plan to spin off the lucrative fintech unit, which includes mobile money, should be finalized by the end of March next year, Johannesburg-based MTN said in a statement. The shares rose in Johannesburg, extending gains for the year to almost 54%. Donald Trump's Facebook ban has been upheld by an oversight board. An independent panel says the company must decide in the coming months whether the former president is permanently locked out of the platform. This is according to BizNews premium partner, the Wall Street Journal. The decision, which is binding, largely ratifies a choice personally approved by Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg in the wake of the January the 6th US Capitol riot. The Wall Street Journal warns that the decision could have far-reaching implications for how technology companies police political speech. And in late-breaking news, it has been confirmed that the ANC has suspended its Secretary General, S. Magashule, in connection with corruption charges. Magashule has officially been suspended, albeit temporarily, and is not allowed to make any public announcements, says Bloomberg. According to Bloomberg, former President Jacob Zuma may also be suspended soon. And that was your BizNews Flash Briefing. I'm Jackie Cameron for BizNews. For more on those and the other big stories of the day, do go to biznewsradio.com.
BrightRock believes that with every change in life comes opportunity, and the markets aren't any different. The daily movements in the markets mean change for us all, sometimes small, sometimes big. This daily market report is made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. And most appropriately, we have Stormers fan Justin Rowe-Roberts to bring us up to date.
The JSE All Share Index was up at 67,400. Some of the day's highlights included MTN up 11.5% to 99 Rand a share as the telecommunications provider announced an upbeat quarterly update and plans to spin off its fintech business worth approximately 80 billion Rand. Tiger Brands was up 9 Rand to 206 Rand per share. First Rand up 3.5% to 51 Rand, and Steinhoff was up 4% to 2 Rand 10 cents as the company announced formal plans to list discount retailer Pepco on the Warsaw Exchange. In the currency markets, the Rand was flat against all the major currencies to 14 Rand 37 cents to the dollar, 19 Rand 98 to the pound, and 17 Rand 25 to the euro. Gold is up at $1,783 an ounce. Brent crude is up at $70 a barrel, and the premier cryptocurrency will put you back 820,000 Rand a Bitcoin.
And it is appropriate because BrightRock also sponsors the Stormers, don't they? So
love BrightRock.
Well,
I think I'm going to start doing my policies through them.
If they sponsored the Sharks, I'd be doing the market report. This market report was made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-match life insurance that changes as your life changes. You're listening to the BizNews Power Hour, brought to you by the team at biznews.com. Well, tonight's guest co-host, Magnus Heystek, the founder and chairman of Brenthurst. In the news, Ace Magashule, just breaking, has been suspended. So the man who had a book written after him, which was termed The Gangster State, is out, or so it seems, Magnus.
It can only be seen as good news, Alec. I mean, it looks like President Cyril Ramaphosa is strengthening his position within the ANC, and that must be good news for South Africa, no doubt about that. And it looks like it's been a last-minute standoff between the so-called Magashule camp and the Ramaphosa camp. But the fact that the top six, or the NEC 6, have signed off on this temporary banishment into the wilds is a very good sign. It might just be a political move, but he had no choice. I mean, they went out and said it is going to happen, and if it did not happen, there would have been a severe reaction, I think, from politicians and the rest of the world. So, can only be seen as good news, and we must take these good news items when they come along and really applaud them. So, yeah, well done, and let's see how it rolls out over time.
One thing that I learned from the months that I spent reading the audio book of the Cyril Ramaphosa biography was that Ramaphosa doesn't enter a fight that he can't win, or that he's not absolutely certain that he is going to win. And certainly when he took on Magashule here, which some people said was a watershed moment for the ANC and for the country, he would have gone in there knowing that he held all the right cards.
I think there was, I mean, the mountains of evidence against Magashule in so many spheres over so many years came into play in this instance. It was very, very difficult for Magashule to defend himself. The books have been written, articles, just about every media has exposed some kind of shenanigans over the last couple of years. So I think, the ANC really didn't have a choice. The evidence was stacked up against Magashule. Books have been written, he's been charged. So yeah, really hard to defend him, say he's, innocent until proven guilty, especially in a top position like that within the ANC.
Indeed. Well, I'm really hoping that our little tech issue we had last night has been solved, because it's a warm welcome now to Miles van der Molen, who, like you, Magnus, is an entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of Cemair. Miles, can you hear us loud and clear? And I'd love to know if Magnus can hear you.
Good evening, Alec. Yes, I can hear you. Can hear you well.
Yeah, I can hear Miles as well.
Okay, we had an issue last night, Miles. You can't believe we were being pilloried on YouTube because for some unknown reason our phone guests were not going. We could hear them fine in the studio, but in our virtual studio they couldn't be heard, and on YouTube they couldn't be heard either. And we were told to wake up and some other really kind of unkind things.
Yeah, shame. Stephen Nathan really had technology working against him yesterday. I was conveying messages to and from over WhatsApp. No, it was chaos. But good to have you here with us, Miles. And good that Magnus can hear you loud and clear.
2.7 billion rand, compared with what SAA has lost over the years, it seems like a drop in the ocean, but it's still 2.7 billion rand, of which 800 million is going to Mango, 1.6 billion is going to South African Airways Technical Services, and 200 million, would you believe, to air chefs. Who knows what they're doing now with that 200 million, because there aren't too many people that are flying, certainly not on SAA. Miles, you've been competing against these guys forever. Not with the benefit of any bailouts. I mentioned in the intro to the program, if you got 800 million that Mango's getting, what could you do with it?
Well, it's a pile of money, and you could build a very impressive airline from a clean sheet with that. So I don't know the exact position. Mango's position is very opaque, unfortunately. But my understanding is that that amount will go some way towards covering the existing creditors. So it's not even you're going to leave them in the black. It's more may be required, one understands.
So this
Although
is
not confirmed.
This is not to put these operations on their feet. This is actually just to meet the debts that they've accrued.
From what I understand, partially so. It won't fully meet all of those debts. They've run up some big accounts, one understands. Unfortunately, the situation with Mango is very opaque. Ever since its inception, they didn't produce their own financials, and they rolled their financials up into SAAs as a subsidiary, which, in my view, when you're using public funds, public has the right to see what you're doing with it. But it's never happened.
Something that hasn't come out yet, but I do know is true because I've seen the Government Gazette notices on it, is that these airlines had to buy their fuel not from Total or Shell, but through a BEE party that was injected between them. So in other words, there was just somebody there rent seeking or rent receiving. Are you in a similar situation, or could you buy from anybody that you like? And kind of secondly, if you had to buy through a third party, how much of an impact would that make on your business?
We buy directly from the lowest cost provider, which in Johannesburg is Sasol. They've got a very large market share, and they're very effective. I have heard that those entities were working through a middleman as such. We did have over the years people that approached us with proposals, but we're very cost conscious, so we just went directly to the source. But I don't remember offhand exactly what margin they would take.
But Magnus, that's like beggars belief, doesn't it? That here you've got airlines that are owned by the taxpayer, but somebody has been injected in between the airline and the petrol company on the basis of some kind of weird BEE logic.
I think it's not only SAA or Mango, or I think it's across the board in all state-owned enterprises, where over the last couple of years, we can see it now in Eskom, and we will see it no doubt in in Prasa. I mean, when there ever is a deal, there's always someone injected between the buyer and the seller. We're seeing it now with the power ships that are coming our way. There are lots of questions about. Suddenly, there's a BEE company between the two that was registered barely a year or two ago, which stands to make millions and millions of rands over the next 20 years, if not hundreds of millions of rands. And that's the problem with cadre deployment and the whole way it's been done. Between a contract and the end producer, you have an ANC-connected company or individual, and there's so many claims of under-the-table payments back to the ANC in exchange for getting the nod for that particular contract. I mean, the media has been feasting on these stories over the last 10 to 15 years, and they're still a fact of life. They're still in most big companies, and it's without the media, they would absolutely flourish. But it's just mind-boggling that Pravin Gordhan, who's fairly sensible guy, still carries on with this, putting more money into our airlines and our state-run airlines.
But coming back to you, Miles, given that these airlines had to have all of these parasites sucking lifeblood out of them, did it make it easier for you to compete?
No, not at all. The fares that they charge are often below cost. You know, even Mango with its current troubles, if you look at the tickets on offer over the next couple of days, are well below the cost of running a service. So that's how you end up with such big losses. You run a service below normal cost, and then your cost base is significantly higher.
And so what's going to happen in future with presumably Mango gone, SAA being a fraction of its previous size, Cemair itself is much smaller than it used to be, and you are seeing a new entrant in Lyft, yourselves, Safair. Is it going to be a pie that's more evenly distributed?
We do hope that we are seeing the beginnings of a leveler playing field. Obviously, the market has taken quite a knock as well, so the demand is heavily subdued at the same time, and you know, everybody wonders when demand will return, but it's dragged on longer than anybody thought already. So yes, we are. You know, all anybody hopes for is a level playing field, and we're hoping that with this round, it's getting more and more difficult to justify these actions and these enormous bailouts, and the reliability of these operators has also been compromised. So it has changed the landscape completely.
Miles, that leads on to my next question. Where is demand at? I know, Cemair, you guys fly more niche routes. I'm sure you're benefiting from the uptick in semigration and leisure travel, especially within South Africa. So where is demand at as a whole?
So what we're seeing, we are on all the trunk routes effectively on peak days. So what we're seeing is an amplified demand curve based on day of the week. So the peak days are strong, and we have seen a strong flow of immigration, particularly to the Western Cape. A lot of people are leaving Johannesburg and still are looking to commute or traveling a lot. So we found some of those niche routes are quite robust. But on the days when demand is soft, you know, traditionally the Tuesdays and Saturdays are the quiet days in airline traffic. We're seeing really, really soft demand there. So we're hoping that international travel will return the second half of the year. I don't think it's likely until the end of the European summer. But we're hoping as we go into our summer, we'll see some international traffic return, and business travel is still quite light. So leisure travel, I think, has been buoyed by very low fares. You know, consumers are offered fares at the moment that are unbeatable. Hopefully, won't be repeated in truth. But very few business travelers are back, and they seem to be a lot more cautious.
Miles, just to close off with, are you telling us then that for the budget conscious, you should be flying on a Tuesday or a Saturday because you get better prices?
Yes, absolutely. You're spoiled for choice at the moment. I mean, you can get, I think Safair is offering tickets at 422 Rand, including VAT and all the airport taxes. And it's just, it's a loss leader to try and stimulate the market. So it's never been a better time to travel.
Miles van der Molen is the chief executive of Cemair. And well, Magnus, it's a tough place that he's been in, but it just shows that when you have good entrepreneurs, they manage to make the best out of any situation. There's a question that came through on our live chat on YouTube for you. It's from Brett Rosendahl, and he asks, he's invested in the JSE via Satrix, so probably the Satrix 40. Is it a good time to reinvest in a global Satrix? In other words, switch out of where he is now?
Not yet. The Satrix 40 has had a nice run the last 12 to 18 months. The commodity cycle is in full play. I mean, that's very evident. All over the world, commodity prices, precious metals, and our trade balance is in a surplus. In fact, it's the highest surplus it's ever had. That would count against a weakening or a sudden weakening in the rand in the foreseeable future. So I will hang on and play out the commodity cycle, which is normally good for the JSE, good for the rand. Wait until the cycle turns, which we don't see yet at this point. In fact, we're very bullish, and we've actually I had a look. I had a look at Pitfallion from Counterpoint's Value Fund. It's doing absolutely mind-boggling stuff. It's up 30%. He's in all the right counters. So I would not make that switch now if you're in the JSE, either in the top, the Aussie or the top 40 or the top 20. You're having a very nice run. Play it out.
Magnus is going to be at our BizNews investment conference in the Drakensberg in the beginning of September. You'll be able to reacquaint yourself with Pitfallion there. But also at the conference, Magnus, is Nick Hudson, whose presentation at our very first conference in March was recorded and went global. It got 500,000 views on YouTube in a very short period of time. It was then taken down by YouTube. They didn't like some of the things he said. We then republished it on other channels, which don't have YouTube policies. And it's apparently had at least another 500,000 views. So it just shows that when you've got a message that's as powerful as his one, people are listening. I caught up with him today, and it's about 8-minute interview that comes now, but very well worth listening to. Here's, well, listen in on our conversation. Well, Nick Hudson is one of our most popular correspondents, if you want to call it that, certainly the people that we interview. He is the co-founder of Panda, and lots has been happening since we last spoke, Nick. You've come in for a bit of heat. Some of your members of your scientific board who have resigned off the board, some saying that that's the end of Panda. What's going on?
We started picking up a very nasty strain of allegations that Panda was an anti-vax organization. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our policy is up on our website. We support the use of safe and efficacious vaccines as part of a focus protection strategy for dealing with the epidemic, and repeated it endlessly on interviews and so on. But it's a very black and white brush that people are painting the world with at the moment. And if you are asking questions about safety or the appropriateness of mass vaccination programs as opposed to focus protection strategies, then there are people out there who will do nothing other than cast you as anti-vax.
And what is anti-vax?
Well, I mean, anti-vax, as I've always understood it, is a kind of fringe lunatic view that says that vaccines of all sorts are either dangerous or immoral or have some or other adverse impacts. There were stories that the MMR vaccines were associated with autism, for example, which turned out to have been a false association, fraudulently so. And so there always has been a minority of people who simply believe that vaccination is in principle wrong. And we certainly cannot be described in that way. I don't know of any member of Panda who holds anything close to that kind of view. And most of the members of Panda have children vaccinated and are vaccinated themselves for the purposes of yellow fever or whatever the case may be. But it doesn't stop people who, can't refute your arguments from trying to call you names, as we've discovered frequently over the course of the last year.
And quite convenient if you can be branded as anti-vax, as it were, put into a lunatic fringe, and then no one will listen to you ever again. But what happened to the members, to get back to that original question, of the scientific board?
Well, 2 newspapers in the UK started contacting them directly with allegations that Panda was anti-vax, and we're talking big publications, the Times of London and the Financial Times. And they went, it was pretty much a coordinated campaign, writing directly to the members of the board, threatening to publish articles linking them to anti-vax movements. They didn't consult us first, so they went directly to the Scientific Advisory Board members. The first we heard about it was one night when we got some panicked emails saying, this is what we're receiving from the Times, from this journalist, Tom Whipple, who's the science editor for the Times. The next morning we swung into gear and wrote, consulted with our attorneys and wrote to them saying, here is the link to Panda's policy on vaccination. If you write any articles alleging that we are anti-vax, we will be after you. And that was enough for both the Times and the Financial Times to see to it that no article was forthcoming. But in many ways, the damage had been done. And, these academics are all in precarious positions themselves. Some of them have come under relentless attack from their own university institutions, that really, in the case of Stanford University, for example, the Senate of Stanford issued a very unusual declaration targeting Scott Atlas and Jay Bhattacharya, I think also Michael Levitt. And it was, nakedly political stuff, nothing to do with whether anything that they'd said was true or false. It was simply, casting aspersions on their characters and attacking them in a very kind of unobjective and personal way. So, all of these people who are speaking out against the malarkey are under one form of pressure or another and subjected to very scurrilous reporting and personal reporting, both in media and in social media. So that was the backdrop against which all of this landed. And we took the step of saying, okay, the advisory board's gotten us to a point of being able to recruit lots of scientists into Panda, into the working team of Panda. It's put us on the map in a variety of ways. We can't be in a position where the whole advisory board is in a tenuous situation. 1 or 2 people have already resigned. Let's take away this pressure. And so what we basically did was dissolve the advisory board as a concept and absorb scientists directly into Panda, so that there's no outward kind of exposure. A very disappointing situation. It's something we would rather not have had to do, but I think Panda's set and established, and it certainly hasn't put an end to the stream of interest in and interviews that was set into motion by the BizNews presentation.
What about here in South Africa? There's 2 issues there. Would there be a political backlash against the ANC, which has already got lots of other issues with our elections coming up only next year? But we are seeing some signs there of opposition getting some strength. And then the second thing is the whole talk about a third wave, which again in the media this morning was being propagated quite aggressively.
Yeah, and everybody seems to forget that we were told under no uncertain terms that the third wave was going to start on the Easter weekend. The government was absolutely convinced of this. They were speaking about it as a fait accompli. And of course, no such thing happened. And so now we read again that there's going to be a third wave, and it's going to be here and there, and it's going to start then. And I think this stuff is really getting a little bit silly. What we would anticipate is that, yes, there would be a winter waxing of respiratory viruses, just as there always is. It's possible that there are some pockets of South Africa that are not yet at herd immunity, as we saw in December, where the second wave made inroads into the middle classes who had successfully shielded. But it is starting to wear a bit thin. And I think though the NRCD may be making these noises, I'm not sure that government isn't starting to work out that it's the economy that see to their electoral performance, and that maybe they're starting to join the dots between not advancing any of the more extreme restrictions ever again, and as a necessity for preserving their standing with their electorate. But it'll be interesting to watch. We have had very mild measures, really, if you compare South Africa to what's been going on in Europe. The residue of this curfew and the lunacy of continued mask wearing, even though the science has really moved on from that. But apart from that, we haven't had the draconian measures that featured so much in the earlier stages of our lockdown.
Nick Hudson will be back at the BizNews conference 31 August to the 2nd of September in the Drakensberg in the Kingdom. And we will be having other guests. We've got a very special import coming from Europe, Hans Otterling, who has invested in 12 unicorns. How's that? The biggest, the most successful European tech investor. He's out here. Thanks to the initiative of Rob Hersov.
That's very exciting, Alec. I'm just crossing my fingers for an invite this time.
No, you got it. You're on. We're going to live broadcast from the Berg. Why not? Rob Hersov will be talking. Of course, Magnus Heystek, who is our guest co-host tonight. We will also, of course, have the man you've just heard from, Nick Hudson. Magda Wizikcha will be there. It's quite a crew. Pit Viljoen, and Martin Freeman is coming out from New York as well. So a really strong, if anything, even stronger lineup than we had at that booked out first event. If you want to come to the BizNews conference, just go onto BizNews, go down the right-hand side, and you'll see there's a link. Click on that, and away you go. Sikonathi Mantshasha is with us now, one of South Africa's top journalists who went to the other side to go and take a job that we were saying earlier, Sikonathi, when you're in journalism, there was a deadline once in a while, maybe once a day. Now you have, it's like the stress just never ends. I have 5 issues that we could spend half an hour on each going through at Eskom. I'm sure that you couldn't have imagined that it would have been this stressful when you moved across.
Alec, good afternoon. Good evening to the listeners as well. I must tell you that you couldn't be more wrong. I knew that it was going to be a very difficult and horrible job, you could say. Remember, I had dedicated a lot of my journalism time to covering Eskom, and I believed I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. And I must say, I have not been disappointed, Alex.
No, for sure. And we all remember, or sort of those of us in the trade remember, you nearly had you weren't swinging any punches, but it looked like the other guy on the other side at Eskom was going to do that. But that's in the past. It does look like things are stabilizing now, excepting now you have to pick up all the muck. This latest issue, Paul O'Sullivan has been keeping us updated for the last 2 years on tubular construction. But the fact that Mike Lomas, who you probably know from your journalism days, was a big deal at CEO of Group 5, is one of those who's been brought into all of this. It seems crazy that it went that high.
Alec, just a step back, I can tell you that very infamous altercation with that lawyer that you referred to was only one of quite a few incidents where punches nearly did roll back in my journalism days.
We missed you on our side of the fence, but anyway.
I'm still alive, I can tell you that. Alec, with regards to these allegations and indeed this investigation that Media 24 has published on the Eskom files, and in particular the matter that you are referring to, it's a matter, if you will remember very well, back in 2019 there were arrests there, and I must say with quite some disappointment that the only arrests in the many cases of corruption that Eskom has reported with the police. There were 4 people arrested, and Mike Lomas is possibly will be the 5th if he finally gets to arrive in South Africa through the extradition. And it's quite one of those things, and hopefully the start of the prosecutions that South Africans have been yearning for since the evidence of corruption has emerged at Eskom.
How much bigger is it? This is a 750 million rand scam that they were pulling, but how much more is out there that we can look forward to seeing being exposed?
Alec, it's impossible for anyone to say with any authority how much the scam has been, the fraud, the corruption. This is because some of these contracts will have worked themselves out of the system. For example, someone who was building a certain part of Medupi may have now completed their job, but there would be much later people would discover some evidence of malfeasance, which is the case here on this tubular construction matter. So there are contracts that are still ongoing and that are under investigation. There are others that have been completed that are obviously under investigation, and that is where I say we have not seen many arrests. Eskom has laid more than 110 charges with the South African Police Services, and we have approached again the NPA in 60 cases. Together, we're working with the Special Investigations Unit and the Asset Forfeiture Unit. This is only the first case out of 53 where the Asset Forfeiture Unit has been approached with evidence that is before the law enforcement agencies, but we have not seen arrests. So I would not be able to say the amount of corruption involved at Eskom is X, but I can tell you that there are cases where Eskom has actually gone to court or has actually successfully reclaimed money from organizations, as you will know, Deloitte Consulting, McKinsey, that have paid ABB. We have received there about 3 billion rand cash back from those deals that had been tainted by this corruption. But there's a whole lot many more that are still before the courts in which Eskom is pursuing a civil claim. I could put a figure and say about 7 billion rand is the amount that is before or that will soon be making itself to court, and those that you know of, including the infamous 3.8 billion rand.
Magnus, I'm sure you've got something that you'd like to pick up on. That's 7 billion rand. That's not small change.
It's a huge amount of money. When the news broke about these 4 people and the assets that have been frozen, I mean, 1.4 billion divided by 4 or 5, I mean, that's like 300 million each. Again, my question is, where do the banks come into play when those kinds of money floats around the banking system? And the tax man, how was it possible to evade having to pay taxes if one assumes that no taxes were paid on these huge amounts of money? And it shows you how the collapse of the collection ability of SARS combined with these massive amount of money that was stolen and the ease with which money could flow through the banking system. It was just a terrible, terrible time for our country. And I don't think the final story or chapter or book has been written on it. The complicity potentially between the banks and the individuals and assets that can move around, motor cars, farms. It's just quite astounding the amounts of money involved.
Sikonathi?
Marius, definitely, Marinas. I mean, it's not. It would not have been possible without the assistance of the banks to pull this kind of heist on South Africa over the past 10 years. I can tell you now, if I knew an answer to your question, how was this possible? I probably would be sipping some nice drinks on an island in the desert somewhere. If I knew how you pull off these kinds of heists. But certainly, as soon as the bank stand up and act, we did see, of course, very late in the day, we did see quite a lot of this activity coming to a halt. And should had SARS and the banks kept up the pressure, and they could have closed down a whole lot of this. But you and I, unfortunately, as journalists, has to just sit there and report on the matters and hope that one day someone in authority will stand up and do the right thing.
Sikonathi, how did you end up at Eskom? And I ask this because there's a lot of heat now around Andre de Ruyter, and him being the CEO, presumably, is the guy who twisted your arm to go and help there.
Alec, when Kulupasi were left in April 2019, a vacancy obviously became open. And I was minding my own business at Daily Maverick when I received a call from a recruitment consultant working for Eskom saying, we have heard about you. We would like you to apply. We would like your CV. There is this position. At that point, the position was combined. It was spokesman together with group corporate affairs executive, and so I did send my application, and there were people that were shortlisted. I was amongst those, and when Eskom decided they should split the roles again into two, a standalone spokesperson together with, and then a group affairs executive. I again received the call and went to the interviews. And I, obviously, Andre de Ruyter did play quite a role in pursuing me to join Eskom. And that's exactly what I did. I must say it was not a very difficult conversation to have, because I had personally dedicated no less than 15 years of my life in the newsroom only to, or almost exclusively to what was going on at Eskom, and that was for the love of the organization and what it could do for the people of South Africa.
So what's going on with Andre de Ruyter now? Every now and then something pops up in the media that there's an investigation into him and that he's on thin ice and he might not be there for much longer. What's the real story?
I must say this, Alec, without any hesitation, that there is a huge fight back by the elements that are responsible for the state of affairs in which Eskom is today, and in which, of course, the rest of the economy is. They are not going to just give up lightly the privilege they have enjoyed over the years. You have seen reports elsewhere about how much fraud has been pulled off on the people of South Africa, and all of it, well, a lot of it has come through Eskom. So the people are still around. They are still in positions of power, both within and without Eskom, and perhaps in the government and in business. What we have now is a clean-up operation that is indeed headed by Andre de Ruyter and as the chief executive, and not many people are happy about it. So you will have these allegations and these complaints about him that you now know only too well. We regard it as fight back of the people that have been benefiting from the collapse of Eskom, the total collapse of governance over the years, and the manner in which all of South Africa now finds itself with regards to electricity production.
Now you've got a perfect seat in the front row of seeing the bad and the good. When people ask you about the future of our country, how do you answer them? Have we passed a critical point where we now are on a road to significant recovery, or are we still at not quite at that point yet?
Alec, it's quite tempting for one to speak as a journalist and remember the good old days where one could say what one really thought. Now, unfortunately for you, I represent Eskom, and I have to tell you about Eskom. So I will answer your question in relation to Eskom. A whole lot has been achieved at Eskom over the past 2 to 3 years with regards to cleaning up the rot, the corruption, and indeed the operations. That's not to say that we are now home and dry. As you know, we can announce load shedding any day, and that is a fact that we have to live with for a while. I am encouraged by the fact that the team that I work for, the management team and the board that I work for, will not do what perhaps some teams did in the past, pretend there is no corruption, pretend everything is hunky-dory. When we get to know or a whiff of any evidence of wrongdoing on the part of people working at Eskom or of suppliers, that we get to the bottom of and investigate properly and do what should be done. So that gives me hope. Of course, it also gives me hope that we have in the government key people that are looking after the best interests of the country in terms of governance. And we may not forget that those people too are facing the same kind of pressures that we have just discussed when it comes to unregulated. There is a huge cleanup operation going on at Eskom. However, it's not going to be as swift as even the capture itself was not as swift. So it's going to take some time, but I'm quite encouraged by the professionals, the many professionals that have dedicated decades of their lives to the service of the people of South Africa inside Eskom. A few may be very famous for all the wrong reasons, but you have a dedicated workforce of professionals that are doing everything they can to give you and I a better future.
Sikonathi, Mantshasha, giving us some wonderful insights there. Do you feel a bit better as a young South African now, Justin?
I really, really enjoy that, Alec. I know he works at Eskom, but it's great to hear him so upbeat, and Sikonathi's got a great sense of humor on him.
Oh, of course he has. The way
and
he
Alec, it might be interesting.
He certainly never held back as a journalist, and a little bit of holding back there on that last question, but it's wonderful to have someone with that expertise and courage in the position that he's in. Reyburn Hendricks needs a little bit of courage now. Reyburn, lovely to have you back on the program. Last time we spoke, things were looking very different. You were looking to list Revego Africa. Then it was postponed, and you still came on the program anyway that night. Now we hear that it's postponed indefinitely. So what happened? Were you just poorly advised, or has the JSE let you down?
Good evening, Alec, and good evening, everyone. You are correct. We've decided to not list the company on the JSE, but for neither of the reasons that you mentioned, being either like the JSE's influence or the advice of our advisors. What really happened is at the end of it, at the end of the book build process, we did achieve the amount of capital that we wanted to raise. However, when we looked at the shielding register, the board and the cornerstone shielders believed that the shielder spread that we achieved was not really suitable for Revego to achieve our short-term goals. Main, I guess, we had a predominance of high net worth individuals and the fund managers, relative to institutions, obviously outside of the cornerstone shielders. So what we need for the growth of the long-term growth of the company are those institutional shielders. And so we really decided that to instead raise capital for initial portfolio and to continue what we're doing, but not in the public space, but in the private space. And really what we believe that this will give us the flexibility to meet our objectives to build the yieldco, and maybe in the future, the public environment is going to be suitable for us. But at this point, like the board and the shareholders and the management, we decided this was not the case.
Reyburn, this is extremely sad. Me and a whole lot of market participants on the JSE was really highly anticipating this IPO. We don't get them too often on the JSE. I think the next one's going to be Coca-Cola Africa in the 12 to 18 months. But just with regards to that, the shareholder analysis, the spread, the IPO, that sort of goes to the investment banks, the big institutional guys. Surely your shareholder spread will become more diverse once you list, and then those shares trade secondary on the JSE.
No, you are correct. So there is part of the JSE listings requirements is to achieve a minimum shareholder spread. That would have been achieved, for example, with the presence of like retail, like investors. However, I think I have mentioned, and we mentioned in the pre-listing statement, that this is a highly capital-intensive sector. It's also, in my personal opinion, we need the presence of South African institutional investors on the equity front to really make it grow in the long term. And I think based on just the analysis that we did, is we were not exactly there yet. And I guess like the big thing is you only get to list once. We'd rather do it right like the first time. And this was just not the moment for us.
Reyburn, do you need those big institutional investors as a result of keep building the book, issuing new capital to fund further projects? Is that the reason for having to have the big banks and the big institutions backing you guys?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. We did have like sufficient capital for the initial portfolio as detailed in the PLS. However, we are taking a very long-term view, and for that we do need access to like the institutional equity market, those players that you mentioned.
This is really strange because you've got individuals who do look after their money better than big institutions who were prepared to support you, high net worth individuals and so on. And yet the big asset management companies who should be putting the money in there in something new and exciting didn't. Now, what did they say to you? What was their rationale for not finding you appealing enough?
Difficult to say. I mean, I think we definitely put our best case kind of forward. I think part of it is that the reason one gives one's money to a fund manager is that they're acting with an element of prudence, to make sure that they evaluate all like the facts, like the upsides and like the downsides, and that it complies with their investment mandate. And I think for a variety of reasons, we've very different things, is that perhaps they didn't have like sufficient time. Like another reason could be that they weren't too sure where it fits within like the bucket of opportunities for them. And then a third thing, definitely, especially for the larger fund managers, the larger institutions, their like initial listing size was probably a bit too small for like where they wanted it to be. So like those would be some of the reasons I think that an institutional fund manager would have in their mind.
Reyburn Hendricks, the chief executive of Revego Africa, not going to be listed on the stock market.
But Coca-Cola Africa is. And we do need to get sharks for Molen. I've been mulling over it, but next week sometime we'll have them on the show, I'm sure.
Magnus, the big institutions in South Africa do have a responsibility also to, and I'm not talking specifically about Revego, but they do have a responsibility to inject money where it can actually make a difference, where it can impact. Not to say, no, it's too small and this SME fund doesn't really need us. Surely some kind of a mindset change is required.
Indeed. Alec, as I was listening to Reyburn, I was thinking back, and you will remember as a fellow journalist in the 90s and the early 2000s, we had the raging market in the emerging market stocks, the development capital sector, the alternative market, and money was pouring into these small startup companies. We used to go to launches almost every week as financial journalists. There was this hive of activity and excitement. It's all died down. It seems as if the big institutions, and since then, the small cap and the mid cap sector has been a graveyard as an investor and or someone who has listed. And it's all part of this bigger picture that the fund managers tend to focus on the bigger dual-listed stocks. Maybe they're hiding all for safety reasons in the same stocks. There's a massive concentration, all buying the same stocks, all showing virtually the same kind of investment returns, which is not good for the country. The JSE is shrinking. It's not fulfilling its role as a creator of fresh capital. Foreigners are fleeing our market, and even South Africans are taking money out of the market. So it's more than just the one listing of Revego, and that didn't succeed. There's a bigger and a macro number here at play, which needs a bit better analysis than what I've just given you. But it is worrying that a lot of companies are saying, and they're delisting Anchor Capital and Guard Track, all those guys. They're saying the JSE is not doing what it's supposed to do. We're either going to do it privately or we're going to do it somewhere else. And the somewhere else is the NASDAQ or somewhere else. So it is a worrying trend, which has been going on for about 20 years now.
But on the other side, if you look at the glass half full, you say, wow, what an opportunity for an innovator and a disruptor to make a marketplace that will attract the Revegos and other companies like that, which private investors have been looking for. Purple Capital have done it, Justin. We had Charles Savage on our show last night, and I think you were saying that they're 27,000 shareholders. 26,000
shareholders, one of the most diverse shareholder bases. But I think that's credit to Charles and them, besides being a little bit of a marketing company in my eyes. They're a great brand, and everyone loves Easy Equity for good reason.
BrightRock believes that with every change in life comes opportunity, and the markets aren't any different. The daily movements in the markets mean change for us all, sometimes small, sometimes big. This daily market report is made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. Let's talk about those markets, Justin.
The JSE All Share Index was up at 67,400. Some of the day's highlights included MTN up 11.5% to 99 Rand as the telecommunications provider announced an upbeat quarterly update and plans to spin off its fintech business worth approximately 80 billion Rand. Tiger Brands up 9 Rand to 206 Rand a share. First Rand up 3.5% to 51 Rand, and Steinhoff up 4% to 2 Rand 10 as the company announced formal plans to list discount retailer Pepco on the Warsaw Exchange. In the currency markets, the Rand was flat against all the major currencies to 14 Rand 37 to the dollar, 19 Rand 98 to the pound, and 17 Rand 25 to the euro. Gold is up at $1,783 an ounce. Brent crude is also up at $70 a barrel. And the premier cryptocurrency will put you back 820,000 Rand a Bitcoin.
And this market report was made just for you by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes. From our team here at BizNews and our guest co-host tonight, Magnus, thanks for being with us. It's lovely having you on the show. And bring your army of fans to listen to the recording tomorrow. Always good to have you on the program, and looking forward to that conference already. It sounds like it's going to be great fun.
It's going to be great fun. We're already starting to work on some interesting themes. So, yeah, I think get there. Go visit Alec in his kingdom.
Not my kingdom. That's the late Svelatili's kingdom, but it is still, for some of us, the most beautiful part in the country. But let's not get into that conversation. Sharks did win, though, at Newlands recently. Let's not get into that conversation either.
The show's over, Alec.
Thanks for just get some sleep. Thanks for being with us tonight. We look forward to being back in your company tomorrow at 5:30 from the team here at BizNews. Until the next time, cheers. You've been listening to the Power Hour, brought to you by the team at BizNews. So there's still 29 people on the no, they're all going on the YouTube. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's a nice it's starting to work. Not that many people asking questions yet, but I'm sure that's going to happen as well.
Yeah, the more we punt it, I think the more people will go into YouTube and whatnot.
Yeah. Anyway, great stuff.
Yeah, that was cool.
All right. So nice show tomorrow. Jeremy Ord, and who's the other?
Co-host, probably not Pete, maybe Delphine.
Okay.
I should maybe ask Delphine early on.
Okay.
Otherwise,
and then
Jackie's interviewing Zach Listo on the results. And then there's maybe a few spillovers from today that we could maybe follow up on. The MTN Ralph Maputa, let's maybe try get him on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think from a company perspective, that's it.
Okay.
What's the news in the morning?
Lots happening.
And then
and I think I've got a feeling we've got something I'm just not remembering that I'm going to be doing tomorrow as well. So.
Well, just let us know when you can make that meeting, and I'll let Nadia know because it's just Nadia tomorrow. Because Jared
at 11. So
yeah,
we're
so 11. But let us know if you need to change. I mean, it's completely flexible.
No problem. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Duru.